I have a pastor friend that pastors in Rhode Island, about an hour and a half from here. And Wednesday morning, it's a long story, I won't share the whole thing with you, but Wednesday morning I got word that his 14-year-old daughter was in Boston Children's Hospital in the ICU and was not expected to survive. 14-year-old, wonderful 14-year-old little girl. And I had set the whole day to study and prepare, and sometimes, like you, God just kind of interrupts the script and says, no, we're doing something else today. And I ran upstairs, and I was just distraught. I said to Dana, someone's got to go be with Todd and his family, and we're friends. And so I got in the car and drove up to Boston and spent a couple hours with this family. We went into the ICU, and the little girl was in a coma and on medicine, and just kind of laying there, and it was very sad. And we prayed. We talked to her. I got down by her ear. Her name was Alex. I said, Alex, don't be afraid. And I talked to her and I prayed with her, and we read some scripture together. And really, we thought that God was going to bring her out. We thought God was going to make it all good. And late Wednesday night, about 2 or 3, she went back into a cardiac failure and pulmonary failure, and got word Thursday that she was even worse. And Dana and I got in the car together Thursday and drove back to Boston, and we walked into a doctor's meeting with a family, and they're surrounded by 6 or 7 physicians, and everybody's weeping, including the physicians. And they knew that it had come to time to basically turn off life support. And if you've ever been in that scenario, it's heartbreaking. And so we walked in, and we walked in with the family. We gathered around the bedside of this little girl. All the doctors, not even Christians, all the doctors gathered around. And Todd grabbed his phone, and he looked up the song that we sang last Sunday with the choir. If you remember it, it was called Never Once. How many of you remember that song? Standing on this mountaintop. That's how it starts. Looking just how far we've come. And then the verse, never once did we ever walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. He took that song, he pressed play, and he set it on his little girl's tummy. And he let the song play. It was, wow. We wept. We turned to a couple of passages, and we read and we prayed. And that's heavy, I know. It's a really bad way to start a message. But I called Todd last night. I said, how are you doing? He said, we're doing okay. We're okay. She's okay. You see, I've been in the rooms of people in those situations that are not okay. I've been in those situations where people had tied their whole meaning and their whole value and their whole significance and all of their hope in temporary things. Things that can shift and change, and things that suffering can destroy. And yet we stood there in that room, and though we wept, we did not sorrow as those that have no hope. We sorrowed. Yeah, the grief was real, but the grief was only the top 15 feet of a river that's 100 feet deep. And the bottom 85 feet runs very strong and very sure and very steadfast. And we live in a culture that wants you to form your whole foundation, all of your meaning, all of your hope, all of your internal strength and value, wants to anchor you to the top 15 feet of life. And there's no foundation, there's no depth, there's no anchor, there's no bottom, that when the top blows to pieces, and when you lose all of that, or when all of that breaks apart, you got nothing left. But when you know God, you can still flourish even when temporal things fall apart. And that is the message of the gospel of the grace of God. It is that God created you for an identity structure, a meaning structure, a value structure that runs much deeper than anything the world, anything that culture could ever